If you're a fan of the crime fiction, if you enjoy a lot of detail and amazing science behind the modern day crime solving, and of course if you love incredible storytelling that will keep you reading till the middle of the night, you'll be well familiar with the character of Temperance Brennan and her creator, Kathy Reichs. Kathy, I'm really thrilled to meet you and to introduce you to our members at TheReadingRoom.com.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You have been writing crime for many, many years now, and you have been very successful right from the start. We know quite a bit about your character. We know quite a bit about your books. We know also a little bit about you as a forensic anthropologist. I wonder if I could ask you about Kathy the Reader. What kind of books do you like? Are you a crime reader? Do you relax with crime, or do you prefer other genres?
Whoa, I read all over the map. I do read crime fiction because I like to keep the pulse of what's going on out there. I don't want to get, 200 pages into a manuscript and learn that Michael Connelly has just written a book about the same thing. So I do kind of, keep abreast of what my colleagues are doing. But I don't just like crime novels. I love things like British humor, like the Douglas Adams Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Terry Pratchett's Discworld series.
Yep. One of the things that I always really enjoy about Temperance Brennan was her emotional and personal attachment to a lot of the cases. And I think, again, in the latest book, Bones of the Lost, right from a start, she meets the character where she actually meets her as a cold body, but she has her own sense of justice needs to be done, and she sees that body as a living person. I think that that's something very unique to your style of writing, and I just wonder is that in any way projection of your own personality when you deal with the cases? Do you have cases that haunt you like that? Do you have cases that you really feel you have this personal need that they need to be solved and the person needs to be in some way vindicated or justified?
You have to stay objective as a scientist. You have to be able to detach and observe and record. But when you have finished with a case, at the end of the day, there are some that get to you more than others. And for me, the ones that I find the most disturbing are the really, truly innocent victims, battered women, for example, or murdered children. Some victims put themselves at risk, such as drug dealers, and they don't deserve to die, but I don't feel as much empathy for those kinds of victims as I do for the truly vulnerable and innocent victims who did nothing to bring this violence onto themselves. So those are the ones that are hardest for me and the ones that you really want to get solved.
The other thing that is quite, I think, characteristic to your writing is that you have taken us to many different places in your series. I mean, we always, in a lot of these, tend to stay around U.S. and Canada, but there have been a lot of trips. Now, this particular new one, you have taken us to one of the most, I think, remote locations from all your series, Afghanistan, and I understand that you have traveled there recently with a group of writers. What was the thing that struck you sort of the most about the country and the people, something that you really didn't expect?
I went with the USO, the United Service Organization, to thank our troops for their service there. It was a very small group. It was just 5 authors that went. And we went to thank them because they're there under very difficult circumstances, under dangerous circumstances. They're not living in luxurious accommodations. And they spent all their time thanking us for coming. So that was really very touching, very moving. And I just thought my readers might like. We spent a lot of time flying around in Black Hawk helicopters and we out to forward operating bases. And so I thought my readers might like to see what that arena is like. We did not get to interact very much with the Afghani people. We were mainly on military installations, but I thought my readers might like to visit that world.
All of your stories are also quite complex. There's a lot of twists and turns, and even though we follow scientific methods, there is still a lot of unexpected, especially for people that are not familiar with it. I just wonder, when you create a new book, do you plot the whole book right from the start, or do you kind of let the investigation lead you to the final conclusions?
I don't do as much outlining as I used to. I don't do nearly as much outlining for the Temperance Brennan books as I do for the young adult, the Tori Brennan books.
Yep.
Maybe that's because I'm writing those with a co-author, my son. We do a very detailed outline for each of those books. With the Temperance Brennan books, I know certainly how the story's beginning. I know what the main theme of the story is. I know what the setting of the story is. And I know what the ending is going to be. But I'll outline maybe the first 6 or 7 chapters. And then it is kind of a free flow. And as I write the story, sometimes I do decide on twists that I hadn't planned on. Or they come to me. And I hadn't thought of them from the very beginning. But I don't let the story take off in its own direction. But it is a more free flow kind of a process than in the past or than with the young adult stories.
Now, The Bones of a Lost is the 16th novel in the Temperance Brennan series, and you have now started another series in the young adult market. So I think it's fair to say that you have a fondness of serialization. But of course, there's a lot of challenges that brings as well. And I kind of wonder if you could tell us, how do you keep track of your character over so many years? Do you have some sort of a big master file on Temperance? Here are all the details that you've already told us about her. And have you ever encountered a member or a reader that actually told you something that you realized that, maybe you have forgotten that you've already told us?
That happens all the time. I constantly say to myself, I need to sit down or have someone go through all the books and create a biography of, when she was born and when her father was born and when he died and how old the sister is and when they got married and when they got divorced, etc. I often find myself going back to earlier books to double check something, a fact, to see if I've gotten it, because it may be 3 or 4 books later that I bring that character back or that I refer back to that situation. So I definitely forget some of the things I've done in the past. Readers definitely come to signings or to public events and say, I really didn't like it when you did this, this, or this. And I have to have them remind me of which book it was and what it was they're referring to.
Now, in 2005, you became also involved in a TV production of The Bones, and the series have been hugely successful as well, and you're quite deeply involved in that production. I wonder, what would you say are the biggest differences between writing for TV and writing for books, and is there anything that you enjoy better in one or the other?
There's a big difference writing for TV or film, feature film. One difference is you don't have to do anything descriptive, because that's all presented visually to the viewer. You don't have to describe the scene or the character. It really boils down a lot to dialogue, because everything is happening through actions, direction for actions, and then dialogue. So there's none of that background coloring and painting that you do in a novel. My role on the show is as a producer, and I read every script, and mainly to give them feedback on the science.
On our side, we have crime is one of the biggest categories. Lots and lots of people love reading crime, and of course, there's a very special group that love this forensic kind of crime. I wonder, why do you think makes the reader so interested in this particular genre? What does really connect them to this?
Yeah, Bones of the Lost, it's a murder mystery. Somebody's been killed, and our heroine has to figure out who did it, who the person is, and who the perpetrator is. I think the big difference is the solution is driven by science. And somewhere in the 90s, forensic science became very popular, became very hot. We worked for years in our labs, and nobody paid any attention. Nobody heard of forensic anthropology, I don't think, even what it was as a discipline. And then somehow it became very, very popular. I think people like to read books with science-driven solutions because it's fun. The bottom line, it's a good story. And for me, that's the most important thing, too, is to write a good story. But I think they also like to learn a little something along the way. They learn a little bit about mitochondrial DNA or blood spatter pattern analysis or forensic toxicology or whatever the science is that I happen to be using. So I think that's part of the fun of reading thrillers.
Kathy, thank you very much for the time that you spent with us. I really enjoyed this chat, and I'm sure that a lot of our members will be very, very curious to hear some of these thoughts that you share with us. And I'm not going to ask you about killing Temperance at all. And I think quite a few readers think that she is so scientific and she's so attached to her cases that I feel she's very safe for a long time yet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.